The Vantage has had, well, more than 10 birthdays since it came out, and Aston Martin has decided it's time to replace it. The looks have been updated, the power has been upgraded, and thank God the technology has been utterly replaced. But to me, myself, do I add to the hypocrisy of everyone needing to buy the newest thing, the newest iPhone? Well, I am a bit guilty of that, but does that translate to something as analog as my Vantage? Is old sometimes better? Today I'm going to be discussing that and answering the question as if I should get the new Vantage. Not too long ago, this was cool. A flip phone, the Motorola Razr, an epic icon. Was that better because it was old? Probably not. I think sometimes technology needs to be updated. But this car isn't about technology. This car isn't the new pretty iPhone. Before I make any decision about any car, there are a few criteria that it needs to meet. What sound does it make? What does it look like? Most importantly, how does it make you feel? With the new Vantage, I feel like we have that over-designedness. The grille seems totally unresolved, the lines seem almost overdone, and it doesn't have the same almost classy look that the prototype DB10 had, that very rounded, simple design. I feel like the DB10 was more Aston Martin than the DB11. And guys, what happened to Aston Martin's being simple and elegant? It really was one of the last cars to not be influenced by anyone or anything, and now we have a DB11 that seems to be desperately over-designed so that people don't forget Aston Martin. But that was the whole thing about Aston Martin. It's this beautiful thing that you can enjoy yourself, and on the off chance that someone does notice it, they appreciate it that much more, and they appreciate the person who chose to drive it. Another big thing to note is the grille of an Aston Martin. They've always been the same, and it's a big part of their design language, and you see it with many car companies. You see it with the kidney grilles of a BMW. And I think what's happening here is kind of what happened to Ferrari. Ferrari used to have quad taillights. That's how you knew it was a Ferrari, unless there was a Corvette that came by, but they copied it, so don't even bother. But anyway, that's how you knew, and then they lost those quad taillights. And I'm afraid that Aston Martin, in becoming modern, is losing their DNA. There's no way the new one looks as Aston Martin as this does, that distinctive shape. In fact, the new grille kind of carries on to the bottom of the ground as if it's totally unresolved and unfinished. I really like the touch of the double grille. Now we're all familiar with these taillights. The rears of Aston Martins have always historically looked quite the same. In fact, a funny little anecdote
is this is the same light from a DB9. In fact, it's obviously a small company, Aston Martin, and a lot of the parts are actually shared, even these reflectors that I've covered, thank God. But anyway, the new rear on the new Vantage looks very F-type-y. In fact, if I were to really look at it, I'd think it was a new version of the F-Type and not the Vantage. And what we saw in the past was the F-Type actually took the form of the Vantage and not the other way around.
Yes, I'm pointing at the stick shift, and I don't mean to be that typical guy that goes, oh, is it not stick? Look, I don't need it to be stick. But the fact that this car isn't fast and I still am totally satisfied with it because it has a stick, I mean, I think there's something to say about that. Unfortunately, the new Vantage isn't quite offered in a stick yet. There's talkings about it going to be offered in a stick, but initially it is not going to be. And this is supposed to be the driver's car. All the other Aston Martins are for the guys that are already going gray, but this was the sports car. I mean, there are no rear seats for your amputated children, and it's just a simple, rudimentary car. There's no sport button in this car. There's no settings to speak of. Yes, you have a crappy GPS, but they didn't even attempt with that. This is just a simple analog car, and I really am not trying to rest on the laurels of everyone going, oh, is it analog, is it stick shift, oh, it's not a car. I think there are appropriate times to have paddle shifters, and I think there are times when it's not necessary. This is one of those times. Is the new one better or worse with a stick? I mean, that's up to the drive.
Now, historically, Aston Martins haven't been mind-bendingly fast. They've been pretty and loud. And it's a beautiful engine, but it's, I'd have to say, a deficiency of this car. If I'm going to be honest, it could be more powerful. There's about 380 horsepower. I tell everyone 400, of course. You have to round these things up. But that is something that's lacking that I think would add a lot of nice personality to, to the new version. But a really cool thing about this Vantage is, to me, it's like an expensive Miata. It has almost a 50-50 weight distribution. It is a little heavy and chunky. That is something, granted, that the Miata isn't. But it has that nice little, ratio of good power where you can really exhaust the engine. You can really, push the limits of this car in the corners. You're not going to be, in trouble, and you can actually see the end of the tunnel. Not to mention, guys, this car is still naturally aspirated. And when you have something naturally aspirated, it's not going to be as efficient as a turbo, but sometimes you don't care because it makes, well, noises. This is another question. Could it be that the new Vantage has been really influenced by emerging markets, like in Saudi Arabia or things like that? I mean, someone gave me the perfect example, saying that, the day that Aston Martin starts making special editions is the day they've lost their soul. And I think that was distinctive when I believe they did like some sort of China edition or something like that with Aston Martin, and there was like a dragon engraved somewhere. Someone could argue that Rolls-Royce has done the same, but I mean, Rolls-Royce is all about bespoke, and Rolls-Royce can do what they want. Anyway, that's something that is distinctive with the design. Has the design become more extreme because of these emerging markets and the pressure to make the car, stand out more substantial? Because think about what a deficiency that is. If your car company is all about subtlety and you're in a market that's never been more flashy before. We're in a market today where a turbo is simply not good enough. Someone has to have the S. That little badge is so important, and it's really captured the market. I mean, these companies are taking us over, us suckers who want the better version AMG or whatever it may be. And I'm just hoping that this influence hasn't carried over with, Aston Martin. And I'm really not trying to talk bad of Aston Martin. I own an Aston Martin, but I'm not loyal to any brand. I speak it as I see it. Now, guys, without becoming too lame and corny, the last criteria I think I want to talk about with, comparing this car to the new Vantage is kind of how it makes you feel. When I drive this car, I literally smile, and I've driven it quite a few times now. I don't garage queen this car in any way. I daily drive this Vantage, and I'll be pushing it, every now and again, and just, hearing the exhaust note and just putting my hand through the gears, and it is such a raw car. And
How can you find cars like this today? It's not Aston Martin's fault that these cars aren't being made anymore. The market just doesn't want it, and the market doesn't know about it. We have younger kids, I'm no grandpa, but we have younger people that aren't, necessarily growing up to drive stick shift cars. So how can you blame them if they don't know what they're missing? So, and these car companies in the end also have to make money. So they can't be making something for a market that doesn't even know how to drive it. And with this car, the stick shift is a huge part of it. I think a stick shift in any car adds like a facet to the personality. It's just another way to get to know how it actually feels. It's like unlocking a sense. And I think you can have that with hydraulic steering. I think you can have it with a number of different things. But that's what's really cool about this car. It literally makes me smile like a 13-year-old schoolboy. I am totally immature and totally in love with this car. And I think it would be hard to compare it to the new one, but I haven't driven the new one. Hopefully they'll let me drive it, and we'll have to see how it makes me feel as well. This time, guys, I think I'm taking the Motorola.